Hello, and welcome to Check It Out with EVPL.
A podcast brought to you by your local library.
I'm your host, Aaron.
And I'm Lori, and today we are here with...
Keisha. Trista.
Hi.
Hey, welcome, both of you. So, where have you guys journeyed from to get here?
I have journeyed from North Park.
And I'm right here at Central.
Okay.
So, horror movies, what's up with that? So, our topic today is horror movies. Now, this is a follow-up to our last episode, which is not aired yet, but it's going to be focusing more on gothic horror.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, we're going to be focusing more on the thrilling, terror-filled, sometimes goopy, like modern, or classic modern horror movies.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a big horror fan, and I think most of our listeners know you are as well. So what are your opinions on horror movies? Our guests?
I have an unhealthy obsession with horror films. I live and breathe it.
No such thing as unhealthy there, yeah.
Unless you start trying to act them out.
Oh, yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. To be continued.
Keisha and I actually met at onboarding through EVPL, and one of the first things that we discovered was our mutual love of horror movies, and that's how our friendship has spawned, and now we spend a lot of weekends watching horror movies.
That's awesome.
Awesome, yeah.
So what are your favorite horror movies then?
Ooh, that's a doozy of a question. I would say Phenomena. 1985, 86, by Dario Argento. I'm a big Italian horror fan, but also the classic Halloween is also up there.
Previous to Scream 5, I would have told you the whole Scream franchise. However, I will retract that now. I for sentimental reasons, I think I have to say Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm just such a Craven fan, but I recently watched one called A Dark Song that is probably pretty top tier of my favorites, and it's from like 2017, so it's a little bit older, but it was my first time watching it, and it was one of the only ones I watched back-to-back times, so I love it.
Nice. And so for a while there, you guys were running what was known as the Fright Club. So you want to kind of tell us a little bit about that? So what was your original conception of it, and what movies you watched?
Yeah, we had two Fright Clubs, one for adults and one for teens. For adults, we have done a various amount of programs. So we did, back in, March, we did a Women of Horror trivia night at the Knickknackery, actually. And that was pretty great. And Trista actually did blood making?
Yeah, how to make your own fake blood. That was our last one in August for the adults. So we've done some book discussions, we've done some film viewings, we did a horror game night. So we just kind of try to cover all of the bases and really just figured out how to work in something we love into work. That's really what we were doing.
So the key word I'm triggered. What horror games do you guys check into?
We had two vintage 1990s Goosebumps games. One was was
it One Night in the Graveyard?
Yeah, and I'm blanking on the...
Horrorland?
Horrorland. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Available at North Park. And Trista brought Godzilla Jenga, and we brought a trivia one.
Trivial Pursuit horror.
Mm-hmm.
I have a game named Gloom that's not quite a horror game, but it's more of like an Addams Family type game where basically you have a family and then your opponent has a family and your goal is to make their family as happy as possible and your family as miserable as possible.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. I want to check that out. We have the Horrified board game where you have to fight all the different classic Universal monsters, and we also have this was from a Kickstarter a while ago, a trivia game called Slash Cards.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So, what's your favorite horror movie then?
Let me pull out my very comically long list.
So I got a whole Letterboxd account here that I can
For the listeners, just know that we all have these phones or these lists ready at any given time.
Right, yeah.
We all have our phones out with our lists that keeps growing.
Yes, we don't. Yeah, this was not created for this podcast. Because I split up my list like hidden gems, things I still need to watch, favorite/repeated viewings. Man, like nothing beats like a good old Chucky marathon for me. And then since it is October, one of my favorite fall horror movies to watch is the original Blair Witch Project.
Yes.
It's a great movie.
It's a great one.
Classic.
Have you seen the Chucky TV show?
I've seen the first season.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Same.
I'm
I
pumped
think
for
it was so good.
yeah.
No, I didn't get to finish it, but did you see the Exorcist TV show?
Yes.
I did not, but I
I
heard
always
good
forget that
things.
existed. Yeah.
I loved the first season, but then I fell off. Was it good?
Season 2 takes on still following the priests, but different family.
Okay.
And I thought it was cool. I'm a big fan of John Cho, and he was in it, so I just was super excited about that.
So it's like an anthology then, kind of?
Kind of, but following still the mission of the main priest from season 1, but it, I think, ties in well enough with season 1. And then it kind of ties back, I think, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think it kind of ties back into the first season a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of leads me to another good question to get us to this next segment. So that is kind of not really like a remake, but it's kind of a continuation, but also at the same time reimagining of like the source material. So this is the roughest transition in the history of transitions, but what has been your favorite horror remake?
Oh.
Remake or reboot?
Either or.
Okay.
Just don't call it a requel, please.
Gosh. Let me think on that.
Okay. One that I can say is I was never a huge fan of the original Wrong Turn movies. They weren't terrible, but they weren't great. But the newest one that came out really surprised me. I really enjoyed that one.
What's the subtitle on that one?
There isn't one. It's just Wrong Turn 2021.
Oh, no, that's right. Because originally it was developed as a different thing, and then they tied it in. Okay, yeah, I'm getting my back.
Yeah, kind of like 10 Cloverfield
Ground noise.
Lane, where it was originally its own film, and then they were like, wait a second, that franchise money.
Oh, that's right. It was originally called The Foundation. That's
Honestly, right off the bat, I think I'm going to have to go with The Hills Have Eyes, maybe. I really liked the first one. And I really liked The Ring. I'm a big Asian horror fan, but I will get into that later. But I would say I think those did a pretty good job at keeping the original respected.
What about you, Trista?
I would say I loved the House on Haunted Hill, the remake of that. I know that's maybe a hot take, but
I think Rotten Tomatoes agrees with you on that.
Yeah, yes, for sure. That's okay though. I rarely agree with them, anyways.
Yes, I love that show too. I would say for me, and I'm a little partial because this was like one of the first horror movies I saw in theaters with my friends, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2000. Yeah. Now, I guess I have to specify 2003.
Yes.
Is that the one with Jessica Biel?
Yes.
This is on my list. It literally says Texas Chainsaw Jessica Biel version. That's a good one. I was going to say that too, actually. So.
I've recently gone through a rewatch of all of those. Skipped the Matthew McConaughey one, but
This now like one of the prime examples of how not to act.
Now, another example is the newish Suspiria was really good. Not that it's better than the original,
right?
But it was good. I enjoyed that one.
I feel like the original and the remake complement each other. Because you do get like different. It's definitely a different take and different story, but there's like bits of crossover in like the themes and like some things they're going for. I loved both of them too.
We were talking before the mics were on about Rob Zombie, and I don't know if you would consider his Halloween a remake per se, but I loved it. I loved the backstory that he did with that and Michael's story. So it's one of my favorites of his, honestly. So.
I actually listened to that podcast. They were going through all the Halloween movies, and they were kind of making fun of Rob Zombies because like they're like, oh, there's all these like hillbillies that cuss like someone living in Illinois. And it's like, sir, have you been to Illinois?
That's pretty accurate. Yeah.
The second one we could have done without, but I thought the first one was pretty good.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a question for all of you guys. What do you think is the worst reboot or remake?
Can I say Scream 5 again? No, I'm sorry.
Pull my Letterboxd account back up and sort by least favorite.
I have a hard time with that because like I love horror movies so much and bringing me so much joy. Now you're forcing me to think about the negatives about it.
I like to be well-rounded.
She's critical. Don't let her fool you.
Right, yeah.
What's your answer?
Oh, the David Gordon Green Halloweens.
Hard disagree there, but I see why people wouldn't enjoy those.
I don't recognize Michael anymore.
Oh, the Nightmare on Elm Street remake.
Oh, with
yes.
CGI.
That is a good one.
And it's a bit devastating because like with everyone involved, including the lead actor, it's just kind of like all these individual ingredients are good, but you mix it together and you get this like crappy stew.
As soon as Robert Englund was not on board, it was over. It was never going to be good. So
yeah, and I'm okay with like, you know, if they want for a character like that who's been so many different things, played this well, has grown in different ways, but I'm always about like trying to find new angles on like, you know, older characters. But when that first trailer dropped and he sounded like Rorschach, I was like, oh no. Like
Now I would say, so looking into this, the worst film, in my opinion, is actually the original and not the remake, which is going to be, I'm sure, super popular among listeners. I hated the original 1971 Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman in it.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
It is so uncomfortable to watch. He's so misogynistic and sexist. It made me want to crawl out of my skin when I was watching it. So I would say probably that one, because the newer one with Alexander Skarsgård in it is still, like, the characters are still very misogynistic, but it doesn't seem to revel in that as much. Wasn't
it James Marsden in that?
Mm-hmm. I believe so, yeah. I just remember Skarsgård because True Blood was on at the time.
Oh,
Yeah.
What are your guys' thoughts on Neve Campbell not being in Scream 6?
Pay her.
Pay her.
Yeah, pay her.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the new Craft was terrible.
I avoided that.
I disagree.
Oh.
But that's okay. It was not the original by any means, but I did appreciate the inclusion in the cast in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in and of itself sold it for me. I'm an easy sell on horror a lot of times, so I just appreciate it. So
I can be. I do enjoy a good, like, esoteric, you know, philosophical horror movie, but I also enjoy just... Okay, I'm not gonna lie. One of my favorite horror movies is Slumber Party Massacre.
The original?
Yes.
I am obsessed.
she loves that.
Did you know Rita Mae Brown wrote the script for that?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that she had, but I knew it was written by a woman.
Yes.
Because when I first watched it, I had to, like, check myself, like, wait a minute, am I just playing into this, you know, like, stereotype I don't like? So I had to look into it, and no, it was written by a woman.
Which is fascinating when you think about the fact that it was a Roger Corman production, too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, lots of, you feel like there would be a lot of butting heads on that, but I think it was kind of behind the scenes, like, not swimmingly, but like as smoothly as you could for a production like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Any other horror movies you guys want to like unleash your like unbridled hatred upon?
Well, I'll ask, what is the last one that you watched that was new to you?
Clearly didn't leave that much of a mark on me if I can't remember.
The last one, I don't know if you would count this as horror or thriller. The last one that I watched was Cape Fear
I love
with
that
De
movie.
Niro.
Yep.
Because I watched the
Love it.
original and then
Yes.
turned around and watched the De Niro version.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, I prefer the De Niro version.
Yeah,
Oh,
I love it.
we rewatched The Strangers like a couple nights ago.
That's on my favorites list.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's like
Yeah.
one of those weird comfort
Yes.
food horror
Absolutely.
movies.
It's one it's like Scream to me, and like it's irreplaceable in the first time that you watch it.
Mhm.
You know, because it's not expected, and I think that's just something to be said for that. So
I usually like to gravitate more towards horror films that feel like it could happen to me, because I love torturing myself, I suppose, but I love being scared in my daily life.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, suspect everyone, lock
Yes.
those doors.
Okay, so the last one I remember is the Mortuary Collection.
ooh, that's on my list to watch.
It's interesting. I like some of the it definitely takes operates in the vein of Tales from the Crypt, where it's a lot of
Yes.
comeuppance
Yeah,
horror stories.
yeah. Tales from the Crypt is one of my all-time favorite things. Keisha and I actually just went and watched Pearl this past weekend.
I
so
guess
that's-
to answer your question, that was the last new to me.
Same.
So.
Yep.
And how was it? Ah,
I really liked it. It's vastly different from X, which I appreciated, and I think Ty West does such a phenomenal job at capturing just different decades and different eras. This one was set in 1918, but he used Technicolor film,
Yep.
and it felt very bizarre to watch because it was kind of bright and happy, but also very disturbing.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like when you watch like The Wizard of Oz, which he makes references to, and you feel that fun feeling, but then it's like, wait,
Yeah.
this is disturbing. So I really liked it.
So would you say it gave you kind of not the same energy, but the same creeped feeling as Midsommar?
It was even perkier than that. It was,
Okay.
and no spoilers, of course, but Pearl's character is just very weirdly innocent, but not at the same time. And she daydreams a lot, so you feel that in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like with Midsummer, even if it's in the daytime, you feel that dread,
Yeah.
and you don't get that at all
Okay.
until later in the film.
Yeah, I feel like Midsommar has a heaviness to it.
Mhm.
Probably, the opening scene is just traumatic.
Yeah.
So everything from there on out is going to be rough. But yeah, I definitely feel like it's like a weighted blanket almost when you're watching it.
The score to Pearl, you would never know that it is a horror film if you just listen to the score, because it keeps with that very bright nature. There is very little eeriness to it, which I find really interesting. And Mia Goth,
Mm-hmm.
give her an award, because she is amazing in these roles, and I don't think Pearl would have been what it was without her.
Oh.
And so
Agreed.
horror movies are just regular Oscar bait. So
yeah, exactly. I'm giving her an award.
Well, we all should.
Call me Mia. No,
I haven't seen that one yet. I did watch X. So in Pearl, like you mentioned the music, is there do you hear this upbeat, lively music while horrible things are happening on screen? Because that makes me super excited if that's what's happening.
It's throughout the whole film for sure.
yeah.
I love those contrasts you get in horror movies sometimes.
I think Promising Young Woman did it really well.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's
Great
I
film.
still haven't seen that.
Great
Oh
film.
my gosh.
Add
So
it
good.
to your list.
Yeah.
That was good.
But I will say, Ty West, I have not seen all of his movies, but every single one I've seen, I'm always blown away by. Especially my favorite one, and probably one of my top 10, The House of the Devil.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to add that to my list of
Yes.
favorites, because the first time I watched that, I was blown away and equally disturbed.
Yes.
I just love that he uses film as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I wish more directors would do that, because it just looks so much better to me.
Mm-hmm.
So another movie that I watched recently that was new to me was called Hilarious. And it is an anthology film of shorts. My favorite one starts. It's called Killer Cart. And it is about a killer shopping cart that tracks down people that don't put them back in their lines.
Wow. That is good. I'm glad somebody did it.
Yeah.
And then another short that they had in there was called Lunch Ladies. And I saw that we had this on Canopy, actually. So Lunch Ladies is about two lunch ladies that decide that they're going to do whatever it takes and they will stop at nothing to become Johnny Depp's personal chef.
I love it.
And it's pretty good. I enjoyed that. There's a lot of shorts in there. Some of them are obviously better than others, but those are my two like shining stars, I think.
I really appreciate when someone can make a short film really impactful, especially since it's a short film. And I feel like sometimes even like a feature-length film doesn't get the point across sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Horror Writers Association. I went to StokerCon this year in May, and they do a short, they call it Final Frame, short film contest. And it was undoubtedly, I think, probably the favorite of many people in attendance there. And the talent that came through on that was astounding, and what you can do with a short amount of time and not a lot of resources. It's really inspiring. So
I think it's interesting because you see in the horror genre that the fans are willing to go out and make basically a homemade film with their homemade blood.
Yes.
And, it doesn't have to be good. It can be cheesy.
Yeah.
And that's something that is almost kind of like a rite of passage, I
Yes.
think, for a lot of horror fans.
yeah.
But I don't know if I've ever seen that with another genre. Like, maybe science fiction a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think those two are kind of intrinsically tied together.
Yes.
But like, I don't ever hear somebody like, oh, I just wrote a love story this weekend and shot it.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, oh, I just watched Schindler's List. Let's go in the backyard. Let's do some depraved World War II thing.
I mean, I guess comedy they do, but that just gets put on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes me think of Spree. I really loved that film as well. I think Joe Keery did a phenomenal job. I think another favorite like subgenre of mine is when people can focus on the negatives of social media and how it can make people do horrible things.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that and I texted her and I said, have you seen this? And she was like, yes. And I was like, why did you not tell me this film existed? It was so good. I loved it. She didn't share my opinion on Fresh, but I also loved Fresh in a very similar way. But
I didn't hate it. This wasn't my favorite.
I love Sebastian Stan, so I thought he did a great job in that film. But yeah, Keisha and I, one of the great things about our friendship is we don't always agree, and so we like to talk about how we don't agree sometimes.
Yes.
So it's fun that way.
It definitely is fun because I like hearing opposing opinions, because if everyone I talk to is like, I loved this film, oh, me too, then maybe I wouldn't see a film from a different perspective, because maybe I didn't see it the way I should have, or I missed something, so...
It feels good when we mutually hate something, though.
Scream 5.
Scream 5.
There is no stronger glue in friendships than like both of you hating something.
Yes.
I had something about. Are you looking forward to the Hellraiser remake coming out?
Yes.
Jamie Clayton, I think, is going to be amazing in that role. What they've shown so far of it looks so great.
So I think everybody has like a different like niche genre that they like the most. So what are you guys' opinions? What's your favorite niche genre?
Not typically a genre, like if you look up like catalogs of movies, but I like movies where horror movies where the protagonists are facing some type of indescribable, incoherent force, and they're like having to guess what the rules are. Like, for example, couple movies I watched that kind of fall under this. Oculus, with a mirror, and then there was Grave Encounters, where it's just like all these like unexplainable things are happening to them, and it's kind of out of their power. There's nothing in their control.
So, like Lovecraftian,
kind of. I guess,
or maybe cosmic.
Cosmic horror, I think, would probably be like better fit for that. Yeah.
So, were you a fan of Mandy then?
I have not watched Mandy. I know. I know. There's like I have a list that actually, I have a list of things that I need to watch if I want to continue calling myself a horror fan, and that is getting added to the list right now.
Is that the title of the list too? I love that.
Oh, things I still need to watch, but I need to update the title now. So actually, yeah. Are there what other genres do you guys like within horror?
It's hard for me to pick because I love everything for the most part, but I really have, and I guess it wouldn't really be like a subgenre, just decade. I really love films from the 70s and 80s. One Dark Knight is one of my favorites with Meg Tilly. Anything, I guess, with rude teen girls and picking on the innocent, like, dorkier main lead and them overcoming things. So, like, Carrie or Let's Scare Jessica to Death is another good one. Not really in that title, but just underdog females overcoming stuff is something I really like, but especially when it's 70s and 80s.
I have a list called Lady Vengeance.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I love that. My favorite genre would definitely be what I'm doing my Halloween countdown list, which is religious and occult films. I just think that historically speaking, there is so much truth in what some of these films bring about that oftentimes doesn't get discussed in everyday life. And so I think that's the great thing about horror genre is that it kind of lets you talk about or explore those more taboo things that aren't always accepted in other realms of living. So I like that.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that because I can't remember the name of the the film professor, but someone said like how horror is so tantalizing for a lot of people because it allows catharsis without like really paying like a real world price for that. Yeah.
I would say my favorite subgenre would be easily folk horror. That's probably my favorite. I watch a lot of it. The Witch is probably one of my favorite movies.
Oh, yeah.
Such a great movie. Yeah. It's so hard to explain to somebody that's not into horror. Like, it's scary, but it's not. But I do like that a lot. I did a whole Halloween, because I do a movie marathon every Halloween. I did a whole Halloween marathon one last year about folk horror. So,
if there was a horror fan that has never watched folk horror, what would be the number one that you would recommend?
It depends. If they like a slow burn, then yes, I would recommend The Witch. If they don't like a slow burn, let's see here. Okay. If they don't like a slow burn, I'm going to recommend one of two. Witchfinder General or Blood on Satan's Claw. Blood on Satan's Claw is probably my favorite out of those two, but Witchfinder General is such a classic, like, main staple.
Yeah.
And if you get super into it and you want to go real nerdy with it, there is a 1922 black and white film called Haxan.
That's on my list.
It's great. It's amazing. I didn't think that I would like it when I watched it because I'm usually not the type to enjoy silent films. But the cinematography that they did, and even though it's black and white, they do have like colors overlaid. So the technical aspect is very impressive as well.
Okay. That's on my list this year too. So, what is the last film that you watched that really shocked you? That made you, as a horror fan, feel uncomfortable, which I find is often hard to do. And I wonder if we're going to have the same answer because of what we most recently watched.
I think you know.
Okay.
Well, I would say it was a movie called Relic that came out in 2020.
Yes.
Because it had the very obvious metaphor, and I won't reveal what it is, but it just really hit like a personal chord with me. And I'll admit, because I'm a manly man, I was crying at the end because of what how they wrapped up that story and the themes they were really hammering home. So yeah, that was the one, like the last one I can think of where I was just beyond like, oh, that was some cool gore or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say my most recent one is The Night House.
Yes, I loved The Night House.
Yeah,
it was on my list last year. It was very good. You wanna tell them?
Yes. So mine would be a film that is currently on HBO that Trista recommended to me called We're All Going to World's Fair.
Oh, I've heard that one.
Yeah.
I have not.
I was probably 2 minutes into it, and I texted her and I said, "Have you watched this yet?" And she said, "No." And I said, "I'm already uncomfortable. Put it on your list." So
then I was live texting her as I was watching it. I think it ties into the whole social media subgenre that I like, and it's very real, very relatable. If you were ever a tween or a teen that had a whole social life on the internet and you were a social outcast and you had no one to talk to. It was very good and heart-wrenching, disturbing, and relatable. And it still sticks with me because I still think about it.
Just real quickly, since we're talking about HBO Max, I know this movie is being removed tomorrow. So if you're listening to this now, all hope is lost. Just skip this the next minute. But The Empty Man, which kind of got lost in the shuffle, like it came out right as we entered orange level pandemic a lockdown. But I see that on horror Twitter a lot. People are just saying you have to watch this. It's one of the best horror movies in the last 5 years to kind of fall between the cracks.
check that out.
Yeah, I'm adding. I can't believe I haven't heard of that before.
You can't see it, but we're writing everything down.
Another film that made me really uncomfortable was called We Need to Do Something. And so this movie is about a family that hides out in a bathroom for what's essentially a tornado.
Yes.
And they get stuck in there. Yes. In their seemingly huge bathroom, by the way, that the whole family can fit into. But either way, it's very unnerving. I think without going into any major spoilers, Dad has issues with alcohol and that comes up in the film. And that is one of those things that like you said, it stuck with me. I still am thinking about it now. I'm like, oh God, I hope that I never met anybody that that happens to. So yeah.
I loved it too. I watched that as well. I thought it was a great movie.
Yeah, I turned it on with my boyfriend, and we did not think it was going to be we thought it was going to be something we would throw on and then make dinner. And we were both like, oh my gosh, what is this? So are there any horror movies, new or old, that you specifically want to watch that you haven't gotten a chance to?
That's a good question. I know this is terrible of me as a horror fan, but I have yet to see The Fly, and I need to.
I would say that mine would be 1932's Most Dangerous Game. I haven't gotten around to watching that one yet, but I like the whole hunting people for sport, not in real life. In a scary movie, the whole hunting persons.
Fun side story. When I first got exposed to that story in middle school, I thought they meant game as in not things you hunt, but an activity. And so I'm just I'm not seeing the gamifying of this whole ordeal here. I'm a little confused, and then I realized, and then later I was like, oh, game is in your hunting game. Yeah.
Which did you watch The Hunt?
No, yes, I did actually. Yeah.
That one was pretty good too, I thought.
I need to rewatch it because I watched it during the pandemic at the drive-in,
Mm-hmm.
but it was raining.
Oh no!
Oh.
So I kind of half heard the film,
Mm-hmm.
but also just heavy raindrops the whole time. So I caught every other word.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I saw, I liked it. Are any of you into Asian horror at all?
I like some of it, yeah. I can't say that I know a lot about it, but I've seen a few, please correct my pronunciation. I think it's Takashi Miike. I watched a few of their films, and I've liked them.
I think it is, I don't know if it'd be categorized as a subgenre since it's a whole part of the world, but I think it gets slept on a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so different from Western films because they focus a lot on mythology, and they're really big into ghosts. Just in Japan alone, there's so many different types of ghosts, which actually, for one of our Fright Clubs, we showed Ju-on, and we talked about all sorts of different ghosts that this was based off of, and they're really big into vengeance. And I think there's just something about Asian horror films that captures the atmosphere. And I feel like for the most part in Western films they focus a lot on having slow building orchestra music to let you know something is about to happen, and jump scares and shock horror, for instance Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And just, I bet when that came out in the 70s, it was wild for everyone to see. And I know Western films like to base things off of true stories or more realistic things like our slashers, but there's just something about Asian horror. And we have a lot on Canopy, actually.
Yeah, we do.
Mm-hmm.
So many. And I do appreciate a good remake. So I mentioned earlier The Ring. But there's just something that cannot be replicated because American directors have their own spin. But
The original Sadako scared me. Whew,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that one main difference between Asian horror and Western horror is that Asian horror tends to be more psychological, whereas Western horror is more physical.
Yes.
So in a Western movie, yeah, like you said, with Texas Chainsaw, you're going to see blood, guts, and gore everywhere, and there's going to be, blood spraying on the wall and everything. Whereas when you watch a more Asian film, you're going to find more of like, oh no, they just put needles under their fingernails. It's still, gory, but not, it's way more psychological.
Oh, unless you watch, what was it? Machine Gun Girl. Like, that's when they're like, oh, like, hey, so we've got like 500,000 to shoot this, and we need to spend 495,000 of that on blood. But I was trying to, like, I'm thinking like recently with some like the bigger hits like Parasite, which does have some horror elements in it, and then Squid Game. Like, you've got like a lot more people interested in Asian cinema and Asian horror recently too.
I think streaming did a lot of that, because I do remember, I'm gonna age myself here, like on dial-up internet and that era, like you couldn't get a lot of foreign films. If you did, it almost had to be like Criterion Collection from Barnes and Noble kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And so I think streaming has made a big impact on that, especially Netflix.
Yeah.
I can't really praise a whole lot on Netflix right now personally, but I will say that they did do that for the foreign film genre, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I actually, going back to the first time I was exposed to Asian horror, it was back in the day when cable was everywhere. I went to the on-demand film options, and there were a bunch of free ones, and I think the first one I watched was One Missed Call, and I was addicted after that. And another thing I really like about Asian horror is that, granted, I do love my Western horror, but they make you sit and be uncomfortable because they build the atmosphere and it's quiet, whereas you don't get loud sounds or like a random cat jumping through a window and like yelling at the person that opens like a closet door or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I really appreciate that. And I will give some recommendations since you said you like folklore.
Mm-hmm.
A Tale of Two Sisters is actually a Korean film, and it is based off of, and I'm going to say the translation because I will not butcher the Korean language, but Rose Flower and Red Lotus. And it's about these sisters that were, their names translate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole film is about the sister comes back home to reunite with her sister, and their dad is remarried and their stepmother is just not nice. And then other creepy things happen. And the folklore is very loosely based on that, but it's just really cool to see what they do with things. There's also, and I'm not sure where this is available, but a Korean adaptation of Hansel and Gretel, and it was like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Speaking
visually.
of Hansel and Gretel, did you ever see Gretel and Hansel?
Yes.
Greta and Hansel?
Yes.
I did not pronounce that correctly. But yeah, that was a great film. I loved it.
I was skeptical until I'm like, oh, what are they going to do with this? And then I was blown away.
I am a big fan, obviously, of folklore and, you know, mythology in general. I think I've talked about that enough. But one thing that I really liked about it was that even though we're getting a lot of like modern remakes of fairy tales where Cinderella is empowered, those are great stories to have, but I never thought about Hansel and Gretel as like being a feminist story. So having that turned on its head for me was actually genuinely kind of surprising.
Mm-hmm. Do you all read horror as well as watch
yes.
it? Okay. What was the last horror book that you read that you really enjoyed?
So I've got one.
Okay.
I'm starting to get into his books, but Stephen Graham Jones.
That's so funny.
I read Mongrel.
Mm.
That was good. It was his own take on like the werewolf mythology. And I haven't cracked it open yet, but I've got a copy of Only Good Indians. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited about that one.
This is a good segue to brag a little bit. I also love Stephen Graham Jones, and my pick would be My Heart is a Chainsaw, which will actually be a trilogy. So that was the first one in the trilogy. And one of the highlights of the Horror Writer Association StokerCon for me was being in an elevator with Stephen Graham Jones. Oh. So the cool thing about going to that is that a lot of these people you don't recognize because they're writers. They're not on camera. They're not on film. So you would be in these spaces with these really amazing creatives and not know who they were. I knew who he was, but so we were in an elevator together, and I got the opportunity to just say, "Hey, I that book was my favorite book so far this year. I loved it." And he was very nice. He said, "I hope you enjoy the next one." I listened to the audiobook actually, and we talked a little bit about the narration on it, and he was really awesome. So that was like the highlight of my year. So,
so cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The last one that I finished, and I think I've actually talked about this on the podcast before, is the Final Girl Support Group.
Yes.
With Grady
Grady Hendrix. I'm really excited for his
him.
new one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that one. And then before that, I read a YA book called All These Bodies by Kendare Blake. And that one was pretty good too.
Yeah.
It's about a young girl who just shows up like covered in blood.
Yeah.
But there's no blood in the crime scene other than that.
Interesting.
And they're trying to figure out why 16 people across multiple states have died and how she's connected to them all.
Oh, wow, that sounds great.
I think YA is really coming with some good horror. I've read a few things in YA that I thought were really great. Did you know that they are making a show of My Best Friend's Exorcism?
Yes, I was going to say that is the last. I reread it.
Yeah.
Coming out like soon.
Soon, yeah.
On Amazon.
Yep,
yeah.
Amazon Prime, so...
Now I need them, though, to make Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires.
That was my least favorite of his, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It was hard for me to get through that one, actually. And I'm usually a big fan of his, but That one was so hard for me for whatever reason. I have no idea.
That was his first one that I read, and actually is the one that got me hooked on him.
Yeah.
Because when I started reading it, I thought to myself, like, this might be fun, but there's no way I'm going to identify with 80s stay-at-home housewives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And somehow I did.
Somehow
I'm
you
nothing
did.
like that.
Yeah.
But it was, I enjoyed that because it's rare that you find a character that's different.
Yes.
That is that different from you, that you feel like you can identify with, much less like it's written by a man.
Right.
Like that was impressive.
Yes. Yeah. He was at StokerCon as well, but I was way too scared to go up and introduce myself. I drew the line. I was like, I can't do it. But I really love his stuff. So.
What do you think is the best movie that was a book? Throwing in a doozy.
I thought about that question too. I'm glad you asked it. Do we have to have read the book? Because I have a pick, but I haven't read the book. I only just love the movie.
I don't think so.
Okay. We make our own rules.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite movies ever, one of my favorite comfort movies is Stir of Echoes. I love that movie. I watched it a million times. I've never read the book, but I probably should.
Just one. I haven't read the original short story, but Hellraiser,
yes.
based on the short story, The Hellbound Heart.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am stuck between, and I know Silence of the Lambs is like horror or thriller, but I'm gonna throw that in here. I really loved Silence of the Lambs, and I'm stuck between that and The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed Psycho
by
Robert Bloch.
Yeah.
That was a good book and movie.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to read that one.
It's actually pretty short, so.
I just really, I read The Exorcist I think 5 years ago, and the part that really stuck out with me, because it was so mind-numbingly boring on purpose when the priest, I forgot his name, the one who has the psychology degree, he's basically trying to science the crud out of her conditions, and he's going through every single possible element it could be, and you're basically oh, he tricked me into reading a science textbook for 25 pages. Cool. But then after that I'm wow, he really in 1968 or 9 when he wrote this, he did all this research to have this really accurate scientific breakdown of what this could be in the realm of reality.
Did you know David Gordon Green is making The Exorcist?
I did. I forgot. Now I remember. Thank you.
There
Another good example is I Am Legend by Robert Neville.
Oh, yeah.
Although I will say I hated the Will Smith ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
I know it's not Will Smith's choice. He didn't write that, but yeah. I didn't like how they changed his character, because they basically took him from, because there's a certain type of horror, and you see it in other genres too, but I think it's really noticeable in horror, where when you're watching the film, none of the people are good people. Nobody's a good guy.
Yeah.
And I think that they took the main character and whitewashed him and made him a good guy when he never really was supposed to be.
But that's Will Smith. You can't
He just
Will
plays
Smith doesn't
Will Smith
have
in
the
everything.
Yeah,
he doesn't even act. He just puts on a costume. He's well, I'm Will Smith hunting zombies today.
Well, he can. He's like Adam Sandler. When he decides to, he can act. But he's just man, I'm more comfortable over here.
That's what you're going to get me going off on a rant about. I can't handle Will Smith.
He did great work in Concussion. I will say that. I'm going to circle us back a little bit because about things you still need to watch. Mm-hmm. And so I have a few here I actually wrote before the podcast. Cube, which is one of those cult classic ones. Yeah. Fire in the Sky, which I heard has one of the most terrifying sequences. From early 90s. Have you seen it?
It's pretty good, yes. And
Write that on your list.
if I remember correctly, we do have that here at Central because I specifically personally requested it a few years ago.
Good job. Good job.
Right.
And then I'm going to kick off into a little story because we've mentioned The Ring a couple times. Mm-hmm. I didn't get a chance. Well, I didn't want to watch The Ring for 20 plus years because when I first tried to watch it, I was like 17. I was a summer camp counselor. And on the last night of camp, when the kids go to bed, we all gather in the main kitchen cabin and we watch like some movies. So one of the movies we had was The Ring. Before that, we watched another teen movie, which, you know, that's perfect pairing right there. Like red wine and salmon.
While you're at a random camp with like no adults,
yeah.
which is also the setting of many horror movies.
So we get through that one, and then we start watching The Ring. And like 5 minutes into it, one of the girl campers starts frantically beating on the door. And she's like, oh my gosh, someone's here. And we're like, okay, well, you're probably having a nightmare. We go over there and we go to the cabin, and lo and behold, there's like 3 strange men just in these girls' cabins. And we chase them off as they like are seriously like laughing to themselves into the woods. So we called the cops, and the whole night we had to stand guard at these cabins because these guys were just circling around, and we would hear them like from opposite ends of the forest being like, we're still here. You're not going to catch us. Like until 5 o'clock in the morning. So then I was like, I probably shouldn't watch Ring. Probably a sign. And then I finally watched it this year, and it was okay.
It feels like a setup to a horror movie all on its own.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that was the thing. I'm like, well, like horror media just doesn't do it for me anymore. I need the real deal.
speaking of the real deal, how do we feel about haunted houses?
I love them.
I love them.
I worked at one for 3 years,
Ooh,
actually.
awesome.
Yeah, I worked at volunteered at Zombie Farm.
Mhm.
And it was, when I tell you the thrill that you get from making people scream as a horror, maybe I would say it's just me, but I don't think it is. I think it goes hand in hand with being a horror fan. It was one of the greatest joys of my life.
Probably why they should do background checks for like,
yeah,
those
exactly.
actors.
Yeah. They shouldn't have let me do that. But yes, it was, and it's hard. It's hard work, actually.
Oh, I can imagine.
You know, and 'cause
yeah.
you have more skeptics than you do
Mhm.
people who are ready to be scared, and so it can be hard to. Teens are the worst.
Yeah.
I have a teen son, so I feel like I can say that they are the worst to try to, because they're too cool to be scared.
Yeah.
But they're also my favorite. So
I feel like I am like the perfect mark for a haunted house because I scare real easily and I will immediately run.
yes, and we can spot you from a mile away.
Mhm.
I remember the first haunted house I had ever gone to was at the Waverly Hills Sanitarium.
Mm-hmm.
And I was nervous because I love horror movies, but I was like, do I like this in real life? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was with my friend and her mom at the time, and they pushed me first. I was first in line, and it's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right, and it was underwhelming.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I really wanted to like it. It was a really cool structure.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything scary. And like at one point they have this ball that they say, oh, it's a little boy ghost playing with the ball. Like, no, you literally built a wind tunnel. It's just wind.
Yeah.
You gotta turn off your brain
Yeah.
for those experiences.
And they were doing a haunted house and then like a tour. I couldn't make it for the tour. So there was like an inflatable dinosaur at the end of it. That's it. That's the finale? Okay. Just kind of sauntered off.
Yeah, I think the creepiest part for me was the underground like trail where they would essentially use it to take dead bodies from the hospital to like the crematorium or the cemetery.
Oh, the body chute?
Yeah. That was for me the creepiest part, but it wasn't because hundreds of dead bodies had been through there. It was because this is so dark. I can't see anything.
What if you trip on something?
We went on the tour last year, and they haven't had a haunted house there, I think, for like a couple of years.
Yeah.
But we were going through, and like the last part they take us through, which if you haven't done like one of the tours at Waverly Hills, like there's like most of the tour, like there's no light.
Yeah.
They don't have like any lights on or anything, or like even the tour guide doesn't have a flashlight.
Yeah.
You just kind of follow their voice, and the last part you go through this really long tunnel, and a lot of people like we're getting freaked out because you're like there for like 2 minutes, which feels like forever in just pure darkness. So some people were kind of like quickly like turning on their home screens. And it turns out that was the part that they had painted for the haunted house. So I turned on my screen. There's a giant evil clown on the wall right to my left. I'm like, I think darkness is better right now.
I think that some of these haunted houses like Waverly or the catacombs play into the lure that already exists around the place, and rely on that a little bit to put you into that mentality. One thing that's really interesting about the Zombie Farm is a lot of their actors and actresses are kids. It's volunteers from 6th grade to 12th grade. And I don't know if you all agree, but kids are creepy. And
yes,
100%.
Yeah,
So
100%, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think they make it, and they love doing it, and they have passion in doing it, and I think that matters a lot. So yes, I am shamelessly plugging the Newburgh Zombie Farm. Please go out and visit them.
I like that they also have like kid-friendly versions.
Yes.
Yeah.
The no scare tours.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had quite a few people that would come out for that, and they like it, and it helps them. I think, and then when they get old enough, they're like, oh, well, I've been here. It's okay. It's not so bad. So there's a lot that goes into it to do those things too. I can speak for them. It's all volunteer based. All of the money is it's not for profit. So they have people that work on that year round. From the time it stops, they're now building the next set for the next year. And it is a production of love. And so they do.
Nice.
They put their all into it. And they do a great job.
A few years ago, I took my nephew to his first haunted house, and it wasn't like a full-blown haunted house because he was, like 5, and I didn't want to traumatize him.
Yeah.
So I took him to a haunted house that somebody had essentially just built in their backyard.
Cool.
And they would let you in if you donated food, and they would take the food to the whoever needed them. And that was really fun. Because they knew he was little and they knew it was his first one because I told him. So they let us just walk around and look at everything without anybody jumping out and scaring him or anything. And I think that really helped because he's now slowly getting into horror. He wants to so bad, but he gets so scared.
Yeah. My birthday is a week after Halloween, and one of my best memories growing up was my mom, for my birthday, threw me a Halloween party, and she turned our basement into one of those like makeshift haunted houses where you like stuck your hand in the bowl and tried to guess what the grapes and all that. And that's still to this day one of my favorite memories. So that it sticks with you.
Yeah.
I have one final question for everyone to kind of lead us out, unless you guys have anything else to add. What is the earliest memory you have of being scared by like a movie or a show or some type of media?
For me, it wasn't even watching anything back in the day. My dad would watch X-Files a lot, and I would hear the theme song, and I would be so terrified just by that theme song. So I feel like that alone is it for me.
I was actually on my mom's lap watching the Nightmare on Elm Street where the pizza, I don't know if you're familiar with the pizza scene where his head is meatballs and they jump out at you.
Oh,
they actually have really
Dream
cool...
Child?
Yes.
Yeah.
They have really...
Or is it, Dream Master?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fourth one. Yeah.
Yes, the fourth one. I was far too young. I want to say probably between 4 and 6. But it terrified me so much, but also I think that was my first like love of it, that I loved to be scared, like you mentioned earlier, like just feeling that horror in your everyday life is so much of being a horror fan. And I remember feeling that at a young age, and my mom is super into horror too, and so just having that path with her has been cool.
That's very cool.
So my first time experiencing like fear from a TV show or a movie is actually not a horror movie at all. It was Disney's Pinocchio. I very much so remember. It was the scene where they're all turned into donkeys. Scared me so much when I was a child.
Yes.
But the first thing that I remember that was actual horror that scared me is, like coming back to what you said earlier, Blair Witch Project. I absolutely thought that was 100% real.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that was, I remember that when that came out.
Because it was beginning of the internet before everybody had internet in their home, but it was common enough.
Yeah.
So if you went to the website or whatever, it acted like it was real.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
there was no reason to believe it wasn't at that time.
And they even released that documentary,
Yes.
quote, air quotes,
Yeah.
about like the missing campers. And
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
had, if I remember correctly, there was a note at the beginning of the film, like, this is based off of true stories or
Yes.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
And if you want like a fun read, like I think Slate did an article on this a few years ago. They interviewed everyone who was involved in making the movie, like the actors and directors. And it's a really like fun read when you realize, oh, like no one was really like, it makes you like admire the actors more because like they were just like, yeah, it was just a job and they weren't in like any serious danger. And the funniest part about it was like during one of the night attacks, originally you were going to see the Blair Witch, which was some guy dressed up in white pantyhose, but they didn't because it was just a frantic shoot. Like they didn't capture it on film, and I'm like, thank goodness,
Yeah.
because that would have killed it. So I'm kind of with you. Mine was non-horror. Lou Ferrigno's Incredible Hulk terrified me as a child. I cried a lot every time my parents would. Well, he popped up on a commercial one time we weren't expecting, and oh man, I was traumatized.
I gotta say, I get it though.
Yeah, he's pretty spooky. Now that I'm thinking about it, there is a movie that also sticks with me, and it's the miniseries of It.
Mm.
And
Oh, yeah.
specifically when Eddie Spaghetti is in the boys' locker room and he comes out of the drain. I refused to take a shower for like the longest time, and I would put like a cup over the drain as if that would stop a clown from getting me.
Well, and he doesn't like rip the hole apart. It's like he bends reality, and I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
what really
Yes.
stuck with me. And
Yeah.
like, 'cause
Yeah.
it's like, oh gosh, like it's like my brain can't fathom what I'm seeing
Yes.
right now.
Yeah. I also have to note, I also saw at around the same time Genesis Land of Confusion video, which if nobody has ever seen that, to this day is still absolutely terrifying. I just watched it not that long ago just to remind myself that it was indeed, it's like puppets.
Mhm.
But it is, I mean, the creepiest. I just want to know what they were doing when they made that. Like what, just... If you haven't watched it, please do. It's a good 4 minutes of your time, I promise.
There was a film, or I guess it still exists. There is a film that I watched back when Netflix still mailed you DVDs.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure it's just called Alice. I don't know exactly. I think it was a Russian film of Alice in Wonderland where they use stop motion animation
Oh.
with like claymation and stuff, and at one point they use like what looks like actual roadkill for like the rabbit. It was so disturbing.
Yes. There's something about like that puppet, like it's weird.
It's the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
It's close
Yeah.
enough to human
Yeah.
for you to recognize that it
Yes.
should be acting human, but it doesn't.
Did you see Willy's Wonderland?
Yes, I did. I loved it.
That film made me uncomfortable.
I am a huge Nick Cage fan,
Yeah.
which I feel like I haven't actually mentioned him this whole
Yeah.
episode. So
Put one down on the chart. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. There's our mandatory reference.
yeah, Pig with Nick Cage. Anybody else see
I
that?
haven't. I've heard great things.
I'm not
though.
ready to like cry, so like that hard. So I haven't watched it yet.
It's not as John Wick as everybody says it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like I heard it's a very like emotionally evocative movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's cool about Willy's Wonderland though is that he doesn't speak the entire film.
Yes, I loved that.
And I think that was interesting for an actor of his caliber to not have a single speaking word.
I think it actually sold his character more for me.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I like that this is something that I have noticed, and I've actually read or heard about him talking about in interviews. When he plays pinball in that movie, how he's like starts dancing around because he thinks that like dancing or singing whenever you're doing day-to-day things is a very human thing. That's a lot of people do that. You know, we make up songs for our cats or whatever. I know I'm not the only one. So he adds that in a lot to make his characters more human. So when he is just playing pinball and dancing around when he gets like a high score, like that's fun. I enjoy that.
I love that.
I just really hope now that he's paid off all of his like tax debt that he still does these weird indie movies.
Yes.
He's I think if anything more he'll be able to now because he doesn't have to take whatever just for money.
No, I want him to take whatever. Like don't even read the script. That's how we get like so many like memeified like Nicolas Cage stuff in the last several
Okay,
years.
but have you watched Jiu-Jitsu?
No.
It was awful.
Well, but isn't that like everyone's regular Hollywood career? Like you get like a couple good ones. You have the stinkers in there too.
I guess. He had a string of stinkers, though, I gotta say.
Yeah. But then we also have Mandy, which I heard was good. Pig. Others.
I just
Mom
don't think
and Dad.
Mom.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, God.
Mom and Dad.
Yes.
I don't think anybody saw him coming as the underdog of horror in the
No.
last however many years, and he's nailing it. So.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, honestly, if you are a Nick Cage fan, I should just do a Nick Cage episode one
You
time.
should.
I mean, it's inevitable.
They did
at
a
this
Nick
point.
Cage display at West, actually, and it was the most successful display to date.
Nice.
Did you do that too, or you tried?
No,
or?
my most successful to date display was men who lost their shirts. That was a romance book. Yeah, I think that the fact that he, like, if you've seen The Last Vampire with Nick Cage,
Yeah.
it shouldn't really be a surprise
Right.
that he's into horror, especially because
Yeah.
he does say, even in Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and in actual interviews,
Yeah.
how much he loves the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it shouldn't come as a surprise, but I do get it, and it kind of caught me off guard even
Yeah.
as a fan.
Yeah. He's being buried in New Orleans. He's already bought his grave,
Mhm.
actually.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. And he bought like a haunted like mansion or
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
and then
at
he
some
had
point.
to immediately
Yeah.
sell it, pretty much.
Yes.
Oh man, look up like the weird things he's bought in the last
Yeah,
like
it's-
3 years. He had like twin cobras at one point,
Yeah.
and
He had a dinosaur skeleton that he had to give back to China because he didn't realize it was stolen, I think. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but there was something fishy about it and he had to give it back. He had his first edition Detective Comics stolen
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
got it back years later.
Yeah. I think he would just be fun to hang out with.
Yeah.
oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely.
He's going off the deep end, though. I'm not gonna lie. He's got that new like baby that he's got, and he married a like young Japanese woman, and now his hair is like Ronald McDonald red. And like, Nick, what are you doing?
Living
This-
his best life. That's the answer.
Well, the thing is, he also fairly recently, within the last couple of years, had one of those like whirlwind 24-hour marriages that
Oh.
like go to Vegas, get married, then get it annulled the next day kind of thing. So maybe he's struggling.
But all this leads to you should go watch Vampire's Kiss. Just incredible performance.
Oh yes, absolutely. One of
Um,
my favorites.
So, all right. Is there anything else you guys want to add after we had to do our Nicolas Cage plug?
There always needs to be a Nicolas Cage.
There always does.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's had a very tumultuous career.
I can't think of anything without bringing us to like hour 5.
Right.
Yeah. We could do this all day.
I could.
I know. And sadly, we have to go away because we don't want our listeners to be listening to a 3-hour podcast. We're not Joe Rogan. So, so I guess on that note, thanks for joining us once again.
Yeah.
And thank you, both of you, for
It was great to
taking
be
some
here.
time out to kind of hang with us and really talk about fun horror stuff.
Yeah.
And Lori, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Oh, well, about time someone.
And thank you, listeners. So if you have any feedback for us, if you have any suggestions, comments, anything like that, you can email us at podcast@evpl.org, or you can reach out to us on social media. And we hope you have a great day.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.